Welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is Darran Muller. Darran is a drummer. Sure. And we're going to talk about all things music. Is that okay? Because drummers musicians? That's one of the going jokes, isn't it?
We hang around musicians, yeah.
So we're going to talk about all things music and drums and stuff like that today. And yeah.
Great.
What was your first memory of music?
I grew up in a church. Basically, my parents were ministers of a church, and so there was a lot of music in the church. And I just remember my earliest memory is just wanting to be a drummer. Like, saw the drummer in church. This is at the age of 4 years old, and the best my parents could do at the time was get me a tambourine. So surprisingly, I could play the tambourine in time. And so at that point in time, you could sit in the pews at church and play a tambourine while the musicians were on the stage playing. And so you would break out the tambourine and play the tambourine in time.
Wow.
Then after a few weeks, tambourines got banned because every other 4-year-old turned up with a tambourine. But that was my earliest memory of, just really being passionate about music and about wanting to learn.
I have a similar story. I remember I'm not sure exactly how old I was, but I must have been 5 or 6. No, maybe actually a bit old, maybe about 7. And there'd been a band play at the primary school, which we lived across the road from.
Yeah.
And I'd seen like the guy play the drums, and then you'll see stuff on TV, and I'd said to my parents, I want a drum kit. And they bought me one.
Wow.
a toy one.
Yeah. Did you demolish it in a matter of days?
I remember it probably lasted about 10 minutes before I'd put the stick through the skin. And
yeah.
I think that possibly the concept of a real one would probably have never taken off just because of the noise.
Yes. I think 90% of playing the drums is the fun of the noise.
I think everybody, to some degree, would like to be a drummer. I think everybody it's a very primal thing.
Isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, you look through every culture, and there's the most thing that you see in, even from like Hawaiian culture and African culture, is always about drums and dancing.
Yes.
And the two, I think, have a long association.
I was going to say earlier that, it's like most musicians, when we're talking about musicians, are frustrated drummers. That to be a musician, you have to be a drummer. You have to have that internal sense of time and that in that sense of rhythm. And if you don't have it, you have to kind of develop it in order to be an accomplished musician.
That's very true. Look, particularly where your sense of time, and because that's where groove comes from, and everybody, it's not just a drummer's domain.
That's right.
It's every musician's domain, isn't it?
I remember I used to teach at a university, and I would often say to my class, whose responsibility is the timekeeping in the band? And they would always be like, it's the drummer. And I'm like, no, you're wrong. It's everyone's responsibility, It's like, it's not just down to one person to be able to play in time, because a band is only as good as its weakest member. And so if you've got other band members playing out of time, then the band's not going to be together, are they? It's like, it's everyone's responsibility.
I think I look at it, I don't know if this is wrong, but I tend to look at it as there's a hierarchy.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody has to have good time.
Yeah.
But there is a hierarchy. And I think it probably starts with the drums, then comes the bass, and then come the other instruments. And then the singer gets, to some degree, there's a little bit of leeway to move in and out of where that might be. Although if you look at someone like Michael Jackson, it's very...
Oh, yes.
The rhythmic element is very, very strong.
It's a part of his whole product, isn't it?
It is.
Rhythmical, even down to the sounds he generated out of his mouth that weren't words.
That's true. So young and you're playing a tambourine in church, does
Yeah.
the church have like music with an actual drummer?
Yeah, the church at the time, and so we're talking late 70s here. And so it was a charismatic church, and so I remember there being a piano, an organ, and a drummer. I don't remember there being at this time any guitars or bass in the band.
Did the organ player have the foot?
I can't recall.
Oh.
No, I was too focused on the drum kit and the drummer to even notice what the other instruments were doing. You know, if we kind of fast forward 2 years. From there, I'm 6 years old. It's probably 2 months before my 7th birthday, and that was the moment that my parents bought me an actual drum kit
Oh, wow.
from the drummer that was playing in the church.
Oh, okay.
And so the drum kit cost my parents, and this is 1981 now, $30. My parents paid for this drum kit. It was an old Olympic Broadway kit, which is an English-made drum kit. It was falling apart. I do have some footage of me playing that as a 6-year-old kid, so I'll send that through to you. You can pop that in here. And the 16-inch floor tom had a Hessian bag, one of those nylon Hessian bags for skin, and I couldn't set it up the traditional way, so the actual tom on the kick drum was over near the floor tom. And the cymbal that I had was where the tom should be, and the hi-hats where it couldn't go high, so they were lower than my actual snare drum, because the snare drum stand couldn't go any lower. And so I'm kind of, snare drum's here, hi-hats are over here, and but that's what I learnt on. And the day we picked it up, we actually moved house. We moved cities, actually. The morning we picked up the drums, we drove 3 hours down the coast to where I grew up in a town called Maryborough. And not long after we'd moved in, the drummer who we bought the drum kit off in Rockhampton, he came down for a week, stayed with us, and every afternoon after school he'd give me a lesson. And so he would go through my father's record collection, and I remember him writing down in a school book, in a pad, three beats: a rock beat, a 3/4, and like a jazzy, like a shuffly kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he'd go through Dad's record collection and basically say, okay, for this song here, play this beat. And so that was my initial training, or initial, learning of how drums apply to music.
Was the music on the records, was that the sort of music you like to listen to, or was it just random stuff?
At that time, it's the only music I knew, because we weren't big radio listeners, and this is the early 80s, and my parents weren't into the secular kind of music that, is we're all used to now. So on my dad's record collection consisted of Tijuana brass, because he was a trombone player, and
Herb Albert and the Tijuana.
Yeah.
My mum had that. My mum had a record that was Herb Albert and the Tijuana Brass.
Yep. So he had a lot of brass band records. He had some Elvis records, and then he had a lot of like Christian hymns and other things like that. So, yeah, that's kind of what I grew up. Learned playing to play to. Those records, and I couldn't pick a song out now that from one of those. Like, it was.
So you had a week of lessons.
A week of lessons.
A week of lessons.
Yep.
How did things progress from there?
Slowly from that point. I do remember probably a year later, the local youth orchestra put on a winter camp down in Hervey Bay, where a lot of school-aged children from around would go there for a week, and basically it was like a music camp.
Okay.
And so the problem I had there was I was the youngest, and I couldn't read music. And so the drum instructor at the time didn't really know what to do with me, because, they were all reading music and then coming together in the afternoons as a group, as a concert band or an orchestra.
Together.
And so and in a week, you just don't have enough time to teach a 7-year-old kid how to read.
Yeah.
And so he showed me how to do a double stroke roll, and that was my task for the week, was practice your double stroke rolls. in the end, I do remember playing a triangle or something in the end of camp concert. But that was my second round of kind of any tuition. Through primary school, I had no other tuition. And in where I grew up in Maryborough, there was probably one music shop that offered music lessons, but it wasn't a financial priority for my parents. They were kind of saving money to buy an acre of land out of town so they could have their own little paradise out in the cane fields. And then we bought that, and then Dad built our own our house out of Besser block bricks, and that took a while.
So in the meantime, while the buildings are happening, where are you living?
So my father and his father, my grandfather, built a double garage out of Besser block bricks. That became our house.
So you lived out of a Besser block garage?
Out on the land, had a water tank.
No air conditioning.
No air conditioning.
Would have been hot in
there was
summer.
some power, but there wasn't any water or sewage. So we had the septic tank going. We had the big water tank, so we had water and that was life. And
I guess it's one of those things. It's like there's probably the best times. You remember that as the greatest time ever.
Yeah, it was. It was fun. I didn't even get to live in the shed. There was a little annex built out the back where the bathroom was and the laundry, and then there was my room. So I lived out in this little annexy kind of part of the back of the shed.
Wow.
But I loved my childhood. We didn't have a lot. But what we did have was a great family life and love from our parents, and also support, and that musicians kind of need that kind of belief in them, to especially while they're developing their craft, and they don't need people saying, oh, you should never do this or should never do. They need people, you should do this, you can do this. Like, have you practiced? Go and practice.
Yeah.
It's like that encouragement and that nurturing, and so I got that from my parents. And it was just a great childhood. And then once I hit high school, that's kind of when I realised, I actually really enjoy music, and I want to learn. And so to read
Did
music.
that open up the gamut of varieties of music out there?
Yeah. For one, it exposed me to a wider range of music, because at the time, up until then, I was still really only listening to Dad's record collection, and then I'd started kind of liking some adult contemporary Christian music because that's what I was allowed to listen to at home.
Yeah.
The parents weren't keen on me listening to Def Leppard or
was there
Van Halen
radio?
There was. I remember the radio because I especially remember the radio in grade 4, 5, 6, and mainly grade 4 and 5, because those 2 years I caught the bus to school, and Mr. Rampton, the bus driver, would have the radio cranking. And so this was 1984, 1985. So we've got on the radio every morning, we've got Toto, we've got
Van Halen,
Aha, we've got all of those those classic 80s songs and bands.
Like Jump, was that 1984 was Jump by Van Halen?
Yeah, Tainted Love, all those kind of things were on there.
84 was like Rosanna and Africa, and
what's the Joan Jett one? I Love Rock and Roll was on there.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's probably a little bit earlier than that, but that was still on. I remember hearing that on the bus. And so I was kind of hearing this music on the bus, and then it was not until years later that I'm like, I remember this song, and it just took me right back to being on the bus going to school. So high school was where I really started to have a bit of a self-belief in me to take it a bit more seriously and back myself.
Was there music lessons in school?
There was, but it wasn't like anything to do with technique. It was more about just learning the school music, whatever we were working on, and learning to read. So I remember it was a slow process for me learning to read charts and read drum music, but it was a process I really enjoyed and I really was committed to doing. I remember the day I realised what a first-time bar and second-time bar was. Like for about a year in high school, I'd been just I don't know, fudging my way through the charts while we were rehearsing in the rehearsal room. And then I had one of my best mates explain to me, so when you hit the first time bar, you go back to the repeat bar, and then the next time you come through, you ignore that first time bar and go to the second. I'm like, that makes so much light bulb moment, And so after that, I'm like, okay, tell me more. Well, like, what else?
It's like
don't
unlocking
I know?
the secrets.
Yeah. So, but that was So by grade 9, I must say that in grade 8, there was mainly 2 other drummers in the school band that were older than me. One was in grade 9 and one was in grade 12. I connected with the guy in grade 12 like straight away, and he lived right near the school, and so I think every Tuesday afternoon I'd go to his house and we'd play drums, and it was kind of like he'd give me a lesson. But at that point I was kind of discovering a lot of things myself, and so I'd end up giving him a lesson, and so we'd kind of be
that's a great
showing
thing. It's
each other.
You're learning from each other. I think that's one of the things that's great about music is the more you learn, you realise there's so much more to learn.
Yeah.
I think it's really a never-ending thing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's even now, like I've been it's almost 45 years since I got my first drum kit, and so I have still got so much to learn.
Yeah. Well, I've been playing guitars for a long time.
Yeah.
And I've always loved listening to slide guitar playing.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of those things I've every now and then I have a crack at it and I realise I stink at it. And I'd love it. And I get that. I hope that I sort of knuckle down at some point and learn how to do that properly.
Yes.
But I mean, that's just one little thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I know. Do you play any other instruments besides drums?
So my mother was a piano teacher, and I remember when we first moved to Maryborough back when I first started playing the drums, when I first got the drum kit, she would sit me down and my younger sister to teach us to play piano. And I just remember like looking at the music and then looking at my drums that were just sitting right there and like, what am I doing here? I want to be right there. I don't want to be. And so at that time I was like, Mum, I don't want to learn piano. I want to learn drums, Yeah. And so if we fast forward to like the mid 10, 15 years later, I started to regret, not taking the piano seriously, because at that point I was starting to getting into being a session musician and recording, but not just as a session musician. I really started getting the itch to produce and arrange.
Yeah.
And so at that point it was like, I'm so far behind now, because if I had the piano chops behind me, the arranging would be and the producing would just be a lot easier than it is.
It would allow you to communicate with other musicians on their level too.
That's right, yeah.
And gain their trust and respect a lot quicker.
Yeah. I worked my own way of being able to produce and, communicate effectively to musicians that I'm producing.
Yep.
But it was a longer process than if I could just go, okay, we're doing this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But again, Mum passed away in 2013, and it's probably my greatest regret is not
learning piano.
Not learning piano. Yeah.
Still got time.
I can still learn it now. Yes, true.
You do a lot of recording.
Yes.
And I know we're jumping ahead a little bit here.
Yeah.
But how do you find you would have been recording over a long period of time, how would you have found the changes in recording techniques?
So I recently was thinking back to my very first session that I did, and it was as a 13-year-old, and it was just one song for we were recording a backing track for a singer to do a live performance at a fashion show, I think. And they couldn't have a band there, but he needed a backing track for this song. And so I'm 13 years old. It was a Friday night, and I used my kick, snare, hi-hats. And at that time, somehow my father had managed to purchase 3 electronic drums, Tama Techstar electronic drums. So they were my toms for this session, which made the engineer and producer really happy because they didn't have to spend time,
getting sounds.
Just plug it in. But I think we did, a rehearsal and maybe 2 takes. It was to a 16-track tape machine, reel to reel, and we recorded the band all in one. But then, I think they overdubbed some other things. But I do remember being done with my part pretty early, but having to, because we all went in the one car, having to wait around till everyone else had finished doing their thing. And so I curled up on a lounge somewhere and fell asleep. And so I didn't get to see what exactly was going on. But, now from that was my initial
recording to tape.
Exposure to a recording.
Yeah.
And once you put that down, there's not a lot you can do, on tape.
Which is, interestingly, it can be a great way to record.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like you learn your part, you play the part properly, and you're done.
Yeah.
There's no tweaking.
No.
There's no continuously going back and re-editing.
Yeah.
It's like...
But now, fast forward to now, like sometimes it's hard to decipher, for example, I did a session maybe 2 years ago now, and it was a remix of a popular song. And I was basically in the studio. No crash cymbals, no toms. We just did kick, snare, and hats in this track. And I remember when it was released, I'm listening to it thinking, I don't recognise any of my own sounds in this.
Oh.
And it's like, what did I did the session, but what have they done? Where
have they used samples?
I can only assume
samples
something, which was what was in the demo. So, it's like it's gone like that far where, and even I did a percussion session late last year, and the track was released just this week gone by, and I'm listening to that percussion on that. It was like a housey kind of Afro house style. I'm listening to my conga part, and I'm like, I'm recognizing the rhythmic part of the part, but not the sound part of the part of what I did. It didn't sound. He either really processed the congas or I don't know if you can resample congas. I guess you can, but I don't know. It was very processed. It was very, very different to what it sounded when I sent it through. But I love recording. It's one of the things I identified early on in my time as something I wanted to really focus on doing. I wanted to become a session drummer, and I wanted not only to do that, but I also wanted to be on the other side of the window, on the other side of the glass, and because I had a lot of arrangement ideas, I had a lot of input, to give ideas, just going around here.
The great thing about recording is it's such a valuable learning tool.
Oh yeah,
that's one of the things I think every musician should have the ability to record themselves. And it's so easy with the technology we have now. You could do it on your iPhone. But the great thing about doing that is listening back to yourself, you can really have a different perspective and hear where you're making mistakes.
Yes.
Well, hopefully you can.
Yeah.
And like I say, great learning tool. So when you were recording at 13 to tape, that would have been in high school.
Yeah, so I was in grade 8 at the time. And this was around that time where I was like starting to formulate an idea in my head of what I wanted to do as a musician. And
was there the concept at that particular point that you could play music for a living?
No, not in my head, or not that I was aware of at that time. That came 2 years later when I was 15. And let's preface that by saying in Maryborough, I didn't have any lessons apart from the ones I've already mentioned because there wasn't really a teacher there that, I don't know.
Readily available.
Yeah. And So I kind of just taught myself, and it wasn't until I was 15. Oh, my mum had a lot of health issues, so we were in Brisbane, a couple of times a year for her to either go into hospital for a week or two, or to get a checkup from a specialist. And so one time we booked some accommodation at Spring Hill, and I just remember us walking as a family down through the valley, and I remember walking past this place, and it's just drums in the window. I'm like, what the heck is this place? And it turned out to be Drumworks at the time, and then just around the corner at the time was Musicians Pro Shop, and I was just like, all right, you guys go ahead without me. I'm staying here for the rest of the day. And so that's when I discovered, Modern Drummer magazine for the first time. And so I scrounged my pocket money and bought a Modern Drummer magazine, and that transformed my drumming. And it just opened my eyes up to a whole world of possibilities just by reading through articles. And
they had elements of instructions.
Everything was covered in that.
And the interviews with people.
Yeah. And so then I started becoming aware of the who's who of drums, back then it was like Steve Gadd, and to an extent there was still a lot of those earlier drummers like Louis Belson and a bit of Buddy Rich and all of that kind of stuff going on. But then within a year, Dave Weckl had kind of hit the scene, Vinny, all of these new line of drummers coming through that were just taking drumming to the next level. And so I just
Dennis
immediately...
Chambers and people like that.
Yeah. And I immediately just ingested that and digested that. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I remember it took me a little bit of time and a little bit of guts. But I remember going to my dad once and just saying, hey, I think I want to be a full-time musician, do that as a career. And he's like, no, get a trade, Darren. Like you can always fall back on that.
It's a familiar conversation.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with my father. Like getting a trade would have been a good thing to do. But my head just wasn't there. I was just focused on drumming and making that, doing what I could to make that into a career.
Obviously, you've got a passion for it. Do you think that that's enough? I mean, I think being singly focused and having no plan B is the best way to go at something.
Right.
Because then it's like you will make it work.
Yeah.
If you focus and put all your attention into it and you have a passion for it,
yes,
you will find a way to make it work.
That's right. And no matter what your circumstances are. Like, so I remember looking at Virgil Donati, and he's dedicated his life to drumming, and as have many other drummers who play at that level. And I remember it just occurred to me one day, it's like, okay, so he's given everything to that to become the best, one of the best in the world. And at the time I believed I can be the best in the world, but I also knew that I didn't want to give everything to it, because I wanted to settle down and get married. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to do, those things that I grew up surrounded by. And I didn't want to miss out on that part of life either. And so you've got some decisions to make then.
Welcome to the juggling act.
Yeah. You can't maintain a, 4 to 5 hours practicing and then going out and working every day when you're raising, babies and being married to someone. And so the responsibility of that determined, kind of what I could give to, the pursuit of drums and music as a career. But it was a long process to make it a full-time career, but very much worth it for me,
Obviously, there would have been a point where you got tuition. How did that come about?
So somehow I met the head of percussion at the Queensland Conservatorium of Music. He's since passed, but his name was Alan Cumberland, and he was a timpanist, I think he maybe did a visit to our school or something. I met him somehow. I would get a 2-hour lesson with him every 2 months at the Conservatorium of Music. So I'd have to travel to Brisbane on a Sunday afternoon, and so he really started teaching me more of the tuned percussion, but also good snare drum technique. With the press rolls and the double stroke rolls and just the dynamic levels. So this is the first time I'm really being pushed on, playing with dynamics and not just hitting every hit the same.
And having control over that.
Yeah, and so that was really great. And
so
then
more nuance.
Yeah, so this is grade 11. I started that and continued through grade 12. And then it came to the time where I needed to audition for university. So I did 3 auditions. I auditioned at the Queensland Conservatorium, the Sydney Conservatorium, and the University at Lismore. And so here's a great story just about parents supporting you. My parents drove me to Lismore for the audition. At the time, Lismore was flooding. We took every back road. And
was Steve Hope's the teacher?
Yeah,
was he there?
I do not remember the audition at all. All I remember is getting there,
And the flooding.
Yeah, I do remember the Sydney Conservatorium audition.
Okay.
And that was with David Jones. And, at the time, I'm this little kid from a country town, way up in Queensland. I knew no one. I didn't know who anyone was.
He's a phenomenal drummer. I saw him play with Tommy Emmanuel.
Yep.
And it was pretty special.
Yes.
Actually, I think I saw him might have been the John Farnham band.
Yeah.
Where he was playing drums and Tommy was playing guitar.
Wow.
Before John Farnham had the
big ones.
Had the big ones.
Yeah, the big albums. I actually just finished reading his book at the end of last year, and what a great book. He's got some health struggles, but hopefully he pulls through all those. And
yeah,
but what a great story he has to tell.
Oh man, and an absolute icon of the industry, and not only a great singer voice,
yes,
but a great entertainer.
Yeah,
you don't necessarily always get all of the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah,
it's like the person who's a great songwriter but a terrible performer.
Yeah. Or a terrible person.
Well, I guess there is that too.
Yeah, it's more common than not. But that whole process of the auditions, that was probably September, October of my final year of school, and because I had Alan Cumberland kind of pressuring me or really wanting me to audition for the tune percussion. So the classical course, bachelor at the con.
Tune percussion, that like xylophone?
Marimba, xylophone, glockenspiel, timpani.
Yeah.
And then my heart was always on the kit. Mm-hmm. It wasn't on the tune percussion. So I ended up auditioning for the jazz course in Brisbane here. I didn't audition in front of the drum teacher. It was in front of the 2 head lecturers that were doing the jazz. And at the time, the jazz course at the Conservatorium in Brisbane was only a 2-year course, associate diploma. And because I had the connection with Alan Cumberland, I knew within maybe a week or 2 that I was going to be offered a spot at Queensland. So that meant I just took the foot off the accelerator at high school and just kind of relaxed for the last, little bit of high school, and just, it was just, so I didn't get great final marks in high school, I must say, but I went straight from there. I moved to Brisbane in the beginning of '92 and then started at the Conservatorium of Music. Interestingly, there was 2 other drummers that started that year with me. One, Dave Atkins.
Yep.
So and then the second one, Nicole Perry. So
Okay.
out of the three of us, Nicole Perry was the only one who graduated. Dave, I think, lasted 6 months. I lasted 12 months, and then Nicole did the whole 2 years.
So why only 12 months?
There's probably a few reasons, and so this is there's more than a few. There's probably three. One, drummers don't know harmony, don't know we know rhythm, but we don't study harmony, and so even more recently when I was lecturing. Most of the of my drum students struggled with the harmony and theory because I just never studied that as a drummer. And so that was very hard for me. And I am probably...
Because that would have been part of the course. You would
Yeah,
have had to
So we had to be transcribing like Charlie Parker saxophone solos.
Wow.
And, I could remember starting it and just going, oh, I have no idea. And so that was really hard for me at the time. So I guess that, and then throughout the year, it was just like I started on a high, and then it just kind of the energy level and the interest level just kind of dwindled down. So by the end of the first year, I'm just like, I don't know if this is actually what I want to do. And at the time I wasn't thinking a big picture. I was just thinking pretty much the next couple of weeks, But the jazz thing, it didn't resound with me. It didn't kind of sit right. And then the third thing was that I was kind of really heavily involved in the church and youth group at that time. And so I saw that more as a priority for some reason, more than my uni. And so I gave a lot of my time that I should have been studying and learning harmony to, doing stuff like musical things at the church and for the youth group, and which in a way has kind of meant I'm now where I am, and there was a lot of things that happened there through that avenue that really shaped myself and my career and helped me along the way. So,
if you had your time over again, would you pick a different path with knowing what you know now? Would you pick a different path with the university course, or do you think that you got something from that's actually been helpful?
I think everything that I've done has been helpful in a way. So even the 12 months I did there, while it was disappointing for me, that I just couldn't
stick with it.
I did learn a lot from it. Mm-hmm. And it was probably the only time in my whole life that I've had a regular drum lesson. And so,
who was teaching there?
So at the time it was Jeff Lotz.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and Jeff was great. Like he was came out of the army band, I think, or was also doing something with it. And funnily enough, when I was in high school, I came down and did work experience at the army band, and so that was great that week actually doing work experience with the army band because I was considering doing that out of school. Mm-hmm. And so, that would have been an interesting pathway. But anyway, I didn't do that. But having lessons with Jeff was great. And just having someone who could show me a lot of things, a lot of better ways to do things and just highlight things that I shouldn't do. And because I'd had to kind of figure that out for myself.
Well, I was going to say, did you find that you had to relearn technique, or was your technique quite good?
At the time, my technique was quite good. So just on that, so when I started learning as a matched grip player.
Okay.
And so, which is basically you're holding the sticks the same way. But, when I started getting right into the modern drummer magazines, and around the same time I started buying VHS instructional videos, and so
you're learning Muller technique.
and all of that stuff. And so most of my drum heroes at the time, so Gad, Weckl, Vinny, Virgil Donati, all played trad grip.
Yeah.
You know, and so I basically, at 15, 16 years old, committed to learning trad grip. And so from then until probably 2005, I played trad grip.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, traditional grip. And there's still things that I find easier to do trad grip than match grip now.
Okay.
And yeah, it's like sometimes I wonder just, should I go back to trad? But I'm committed to the match grip now. I think I'll just stick with that. I'm too old to.
I'm just wondering if there was different styles of music and different,
Well,
like whether one applies more to stylistically.
yeah. Well, with just getting back to that other question first about, you know, what did Jeff highlight anything that with my technique that was wrong or bad? Or I think he was pretty happy with my technique, and I put it down to two reasons. One, because I really watched those VHS instructional videos. So I watched Virgil's technique, which was impeccable, like his left hand, and then Weckl, you know, on some of his VHS tapes. And then the lessons I had with Alan Cumberland. Now he would only accept match grip, so he only taught me match grip on, well, for me anyway. Like it was always match grip on the snare drum, but just those 2 years of having lessons with him and highlighting the dynamics and the correct technique to use to play, you know, ghost notes and accented notes, and so technique-wise, I was good. It was more about kind of just a deep dive into jazz, you know, and learning, you know, all of the great jazz players. And
stylistically, that's a very different way of approaching a drum kit too. Playing jazz.
Oh yeah,
it's all driven via the ride.
And there's so many different.
Whereas a pop rock thing's driven.
Yep,
kick and snare.
Yeah. So, and even in the jazz thing, there's so many different ways of playing, depending on what you're doing, whether you're doing big band. So, you know, I kind of mentioned earlier that there was a teacher in Maryborough, but yeah, I saw him once or twice for some lessons just when I had some trouble with a piece of music at school. He was definitely like that, from that big band kind of style of playing, where it was like a 4 on the floor, feather the kick drum, swing beats. And then, you know, then Weckl comes out with the Chick Corea acoustic band and plays jazz that I've never heard before, you know, and it's like acoustic trio, and it's like, there's no kick, there's a kick there, and then there's snare accent here, and it's all just the hats and ride, you know, and so that's your bebop kind of style of jazz, and so I was kind of really getting into that, and that's the style I really liked playing, and I guess there's a few drum books that are like the Bible.
Yep.
For jazz playing, and one that we used at the con was Advanced Techniques for the Modern Drummer, which is a Jim Chapin book, and that was a great book. And the amazing thing about that book is it was written so many years ago, and it's still so relevant now. And as with a lot of other drum books that were written in the 40s or 20s, 30s, 40s, you know, a lot of these books I still teach out of today.
Yeah. You finish up at uni, or you decide that you're not going to finish uni.
Yeah.
What happens for you then?
I just kind of sit around twiddling my thumbs for a year.
Drumming's one of those things you would generally do it with other musicians.
Yes.
Had you been playing with other players?
I met people and did a couple of gigs in uni. Then after that, I was playing all the church stuff.
Okay.
And so in '93, so in the church that I was involved with, they had a big youth kind of movement, and called Youth Alive, and basically 2 or 3 times a year, all of the youth groups from all the churches in Queensland would come together for a night.
Yep.
And so they would have a band that would provide the music for that, and so they could sing the choruses and the songs. And I managed to get into that band, but not as a drummer, because that was the thing. I moved to Brisbane. Everyone's got a drummer. And everyone's kind of already sorted out. And so at the time, I had learnt trumpet. Sorry, I didn't mention before. Because my parents wanted me to learn a melodic instrument. I did trumpet for a year.
When was that? What year?
Grade 11-ish.
So, high school.
Maybe, yeah. And so I kind of, through the church, one of my good friends played sax. So we had this little horn section that we did, and we ended up playing in this band that did the big gathering of people together. And they would do it at good venues. So the very first one I did was at Boondall Entertainment Centre, 13,000 people.
Wow.
Tommy Emmanuel is the guest entertainer that night. And here I am on stage playing with him. And it was just like, whoa, that kind of went from 0 to 100 in no time.
Yeah.
And then I added percussion, because it's like, some of these songs could do with some, percussion. And the guy who's running the group said, yeah, that's fine, yeah. So kind of playing trumpet, and the songs I'm not playing trumpet in, I'm playing percussion. And so I didn't know how to play percussion, but I learned how to play percussion because there was a need there. And then it was through that process where I started to develop this idea of I need to diversify what I'm doing. And it's kind of, doing the sessions, learning some new things. It's like I can kind of, if I can't play drums in a band, I'd rather be in the band and play percussion or trumpet. And so from that, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to say yes to everything. I'm going to learn whatever I can, just immerse myself in. So I guess in a way, 1993 was that for me. It was just that kind of setting the foundation for, just something to build on career-wise. Although I didn't know it at the time, what I was doing. I was just saying yes, I'll do that. I'll learn how to do this. And I ended up being asked to play a trumpet feature for a church somewhere for I don't know whether it was an Easter or a Christmas thing they were doing. Wow. Anyway, I was terrible. But it was just because I was always, I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. Anyway, that's where I met, the girl who became my wife and the mother of my children. And within 2 years of that, here I am walking down the aisle getting married at the age of 19.
Oh, wow.
20. Yeah. And so, but in all that, during that time, I started working at a music shop as well, and that also helped a lot.
So that helped in the way of meeting other musicians, or?
Yeah, meeting other musicians plus meeting distributors of product.
Oh, okay. And
so developing relationship with them. And so through working in a music shop, I around that time I had Zildjian saying, we'll give you a B grade endorsement, which means, you're not at our top level, but you're kind of there and you can still buy your cymbals at half price. And so, that helped because I didn't have a lot of money at the time. And then I, played Sonar drums for years and years and years. I guess from 93 through to 98, I worked at various music shops. And that's how I kind of got to know the guy who's responsible for the companies I represent now. And so at one of the music shops, the last one I worked at, he took over from me after I left. And then he went from that shop to becoming working for one of the suppliers. And then he went from that supplier to working for Yamaha Australia. And I remember him coming to me in 2011 saying, I need to catch up with you. I'm going to become the national drum sales for Yamaha, and I want you to be my first endorsee. And I'm
wow.
Whoa, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, it was that networking.
And they make great stuff too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like Yamaha, it's that company where it's like, I need to buy a drum kit and a motorbike and a jet ski. Oh, cool, got you covered.
A trumpet.
A
piano, a synth.
And
bass,
it's that company that
guitar,
you can be assured that you're getting a quality
PA.
Yeah, everything.
And they've had some revolutionary stuff. Like the DX7 was a game changer in the world of synths.
Yep.
They've really been at the forefront of a lot of different areas, haven't they?
Yeah, and so through that, one thing is that I've always been strong on is networking and developing relationships, because it may not come to anything right now, but years down the track, you never know. What that relationship and cultivating that relationship might bring. And I don't say that in a way of saying that I only have relationships because of something I can get out of it. That's not what I mean at all.
No,
It's
I get what you mean.
Yeah, it's you just don't discount meeting someone and becoming a friend with them, because you never know what that relationship might lead to in the future.
Yeah, coming from the background that you have, I guess it's that thing too of having an appreciation for people.
Yeah.
It's just that thing of just being a good human.
Yeah. I feel like all people have great potential, but just need someone to believe in them. Need someone to say, hey, be a cheerleader.
So you've done some teaching.
Yes.
How did you get into that, and how have you found, is it something that you really enjoy?
Teaching is something I got into not intentionally. My parents' best friends at the time, and this is back to around that 13, 14-year-old kind of time, their son, who was maybe 3 or 4 years younger than I, wanted to learn drums, and they had bought him a drum kit. And so I would teach him once a week for half an hour, and I think I charged him $2 for the lesson, and that's how I started teaching. And then another family found out I was teaching, so I started teaching their son. And so the very first student I had, it was a funny thing. He kind of was so quiet and just introverted, and would hardly say anything in his drum lesson. But he had really good potential. He was a good drummer. He'd learnt the things I showed him, and but years later, he ended up starting in Maryborough his own. He had his own music shop there, started his own music school, and then he moved it to Gladstone. And then, as a part of his music shop and music school, he started a coffee shop. And then the coffee shop went gangbusters, and he sold the music.
So obviously, he's got a skill.
Yeah,
he has a skill for running a business.
Yeah. But and so now, he's a good friend of mine, and he's just smashing goals, and has a family, has kids, he's relocated to Hervey Bay now, and he's doing some great things there. But there was this. I did a tour in 2019, and the most amazing thing happened, because he was living in Gladstone at the time. I was there for one night on this tour. It was a theatre tour. We were doing a theatre show. And at the time, the guy who sold me my first drum kit and gave me those first drum lessons,
$30,
worked in the theatre we were playing in. He was one of the ushers there. So I've got this photo of my very first drum student and my very first drum teacher and me together.
Wow.
Yeah, which is just brilliant. I love it. Yeah. I love those kind of moments.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's one of those things you just never know.
Yes.
Where people are going to go, and
yeah.
So what's the famous saying? Be kind to the people on the way up, because you're going to meet them on the way back down.
I just think you just be kind to people.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost you anything.
That's true.
It doesn't cost anything to be a nice person.
That's true.
And that's something that I live by. I've been frustrated by people in the past, but
I think that happens to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. You've just got to learn how to navigate that in the right way.
It's one of those things. It's like your very best friend in life. You could be frustrated with.
I have been. One of my greatest friends used to tick me off like crazy. But I love him. Like, he's one of my favourite people in the world.
Yeah. And the great thing about that is because that person knows you so well, they know how to push your buttons too.
Yeah. I don't think he was doing it intentionally. I think it was just his naivety and just his, I have gone through, and probably still do go through, you know, seasons of self-absorption, you know, just being, you know, a little bit only concerned with what I'm doing and not concerned about the big picture or what other people are going through. And so I think that at the time used to just tick me off so much, and then because I'd realised that I was doing that, but he hadn't yet. And so, you know, it's a journey, and you kind of realise these things as you go along and you learn.
So you've done quite a lot of different things.
Yes.
What would you say would be a highlight for you of the things that you've done?
Well, I feel like at my age and with the way my body's feeling at the moment, like being still able to go out and do gigs is a highlight for me. But you know, I've been able to see a lot of the world through traveling for performing, and being paid to do so, and like that's just an amazing thing for me. I love adventure. I love getting out and seeing new places, and so, you know, that kind of thing just really is up there for me, you know, traveling, playing music with people that I really enjoy playing music with. And,
yeah, wow.
And I guess two of the most recent things that I've done is I was part of the Cause tour of Australia and New Zealand in late 2023. Mm-hmm. That was a really positive experience for me. I was a part of the Toni Childs band for that tour. Mm-hmm. And Toni was one of the supports, as was Natalie Imbruglia and her band. And it was just great getting to mix and meet, you know, with people who are doing what we do and learning about their life, you know, and how they grew up and how they learnt and what they're doing with, you know, their career. And so I've made some really good friends on that tour. And Natalie's drummer, Paul, he's a great guy. And I just loved hanging out with him and having some good chats. And, you know, obviously got to meet the Cause and had on our last night of the tour, which ended in Christchurch in New Zealand, we had a bit of an end of tour party, and I just remember having a good sit down with Caroline and just quizzing her on, you know, tell me about how it all happened, like you know, how did this all start for you? And, you know, we talked a lot of stuff through, and it was good. Just getting to know people is one of those highlights as well. But there's been some spectacular gigs as well, and gigs that I never thought I'd do. So way before he won Australian Idol and through the whole church thing, I knew and had worked with Guy Sebastian before. Okay. And so, we had a lot of mutual friends. He was living in Adelaide at that time and still at school when I met him for the first time. And so, you know, after a while he did, you know, became Australian Idol and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, in 2018, I get a call from him saying, hey, do you want to do some gigs for me? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And bar probably 2 gigs that I've done for him, every one of them has been like this weird, amazing thing. So there was the 2019 Logie Awards that I played with him, the tennis, the Australian Open, we played like on the court just before the men's final in 2018. Or was it 2019? It was 2019, yeah. Wow. And then last year we went and did this amazing gig in Dubai. Actually, it was out like 4 hours drive out of Dubai, and in the middle of the desert, 7-star resort. And we do a 45...
7 stars.
It was...
What constitutes a 7-star
I don't know.
resort?
I have no idea. But I can't even pronounce the name of the resort. Okay. But it was amazing. I'd never been anywhere like this. And we were there to perform at a private 60th birthday. We played for 45 minutes but stayed for 5 days. And yeah, it was just like... You don't do those, like you never dream of doing those kind of things, you know. I never dreamed that I'd get to meet half the people that I've met. But I think the highlight for me is kind of coming back to what I started with, and that is, you know, actually being able to do what I love and make a good living out of it, and be on a journey with lots of great people.
Yeah.
While I'm doing it.
You talked about your health.
Yep.
What health challenges have you had?
Yeah. So there's a few now, and there's a few from a little while ago that I still struggle with. So at the end of 2004, I was on a session down in Gosford, and it was a multi-day session, and the studio had accommodation. So it was the second day, and I just remembered playing the first take of that day, and halfway through the take, my hands and fingers just went numb, and pins and needles, and I could barely. By the end of the take, literally, your grip is normally here, but I couldn't grip the sticks. I lost all control, and basically, I finished the take holding the drumsticks like this, and I could, and so I'm like, what the heck is going on? What is that? So straight away we had a break, and one of the guys in the studio just started kind of massaging me and trying to loosen me up, and But after a while, and going to the doctor, going to some specialists, and doing a nerve conduction study, they basically said, "Oh, you've got carpal tunnel," and so I started getting treatment for that straight away. And I mean, the ultimate treatment for that is an operation.
Yes,
I've never had it. I just did lots of physio, lots of stretching, all of the things that I should have been doing before any playing, but never knew because I didn't have a teacher to tell me.
Because it's quite an abrupt thing,
It is.
particularly hitting a snare.
Yeah, any drum or cymbal, you basically all the vibration from that is just shooting straight up there and straight up here, and so I didn't. Did you have to stop playing drums for a while? I stopped for 6 months. So the first 6 months of 2005, I didn't play, and just got physiotherapy. Just did lots of stretching, and even coming back, I still had trouble. And so, I don't know when exactly it was, but over time, I actually, before I go into that, the other things I did when I came back to playing, I changed a lot of things. So I used to absolutely idolize Dave Weckl, and so my whole setup was like his, where you sit really low and everything's really high around you. So your ride cymbals up here, and your crashes up here, and your toms are up here, and so I changed that part of my setup. I started sitting really high and having everything low, so I didn't have to kind of overextend. And so everything was low. The other thing I did was change from hickory drumsticks to maple. So maple drumsticks are less dense. Yeah, there's a softer wood, so they don't.
Does that
carry...
mean you chew through them faster?
Yeah. Yep. And I've got. I'm a bit of a drumstick hoarder, so whenever I break a stick, I keep it. Like, I don't throw it out.
Okay.
But there's a reason for that. I'm going to actually do some really cool...
You're going to have a good barbecue sometime.
Yeah. Bonfire.
Kindling.
Yeah. No, I'm going to actually do a really cool artwork for my drum room
Yep.
out of the broken drumsticks. So I've kind of got an idea formulated here on what I'm doing. I just got to find the time to actually, make it all happen. So, yeah. But... using the maple sticks means that there's less vibration going through the stick into the hand. Also, the sticks I used to use, I'm also a huge Jeff Porcaro fan. And so at that time I was using his signature drumstick, which has a very similar tip to this, but is a lot thinner in diameter than this drumstick. So this stick, I started using thicker sticks, but because they're maple, they're not heavier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's a lighter stick. But because it's thick, I don't have to grip it as tight, and I changed my technique. So I had to relearn technique as well.
Wow.
And so now my grip is a lot looser. I try to let the stick do more of the work than the wrist and elbow and fingers.
So would that be considered like better technique?
Yes, yeah. So in a way, the act of not having a drum teacher from the start kind of set me up for this problem. I didn't have anyone there to say, hey, you need to stretch, or you need to do a warm-up before you go and do a gig, and play in front of thousands of people.
What do you do as a warm up? What's your thing to do?
I usually just try and do some basic rudiments, singles and doubles.
Just with a pad?
Yeah. Now, if I grab one of your electric drum pads,
Yeah.
I'll show you just.
Yeah, I'll go and grab one for you.
Yeah. I saw one just sitting over there. I'll tilt that down a little bit just so you can kind of see the face of it. But yeah, for warming up, it's about kind of just releasing the wrists and arms and fingers, but also just getting the stick moving. So a lot of my technique is trying to let the stick bounce, rebound, and that's good technique.
Is that part of? I mean, I watched what they call Muller technique.
Yeah.
Is that sort of a
Muller technique is more for multiple bounces. So when you're doing 2, 3, so it's about the initial strike of the drum.
Yeah, we'll pull this. Just pull it. Yeah, that's better.
So it's about the initial strike of the drum, but then on the rebound you're doing
because it's
more hits. So you're going down, up. So you're doing a downstroke, upstroke hit. On a single or triplets. So you essentially get out of one hit, you're getting 3 notes or 3 hits. But for warm-ups, I do just thumbs on top just to kind of get the fingers moving and the stick moving there. So that's finger technique there.
And that's just basically so that the sticks are basically that's between your thumb and first finger is like a rocker, and then is it the back of the...
Yeah, and then just, so this is the pivot or here, so you can use that finger or this finger to pivot on, or both, which is kind of what I do. And then you...
And the
ring
back...
finger, little finger, pinky is kind of your finger control. So there's that way, then there's kind of rolling your wrists over. So it's more of a wrist action.
Oh, okay.
Now this one, I learned a really good warm-up technique from Jeff Lotz when I was at the con on this one. And that is to really kind of, you intentionally trying to pull the stick back. And then one really sharp, as hard as you can, hit down. And that basically is just, it just really releases your arm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a really good one. Plus and it's not about speed, it's just about keeping the tension. And then just some general, multi-dynamic or accents and non-accents in the warm-up as well. So I would do like paradiddles. But just really concentrating on accents and non-accents and just getting the consistency in that as well. And then multiple bounces or multiple hits, so like 4s.
Was it ever a thing for you where you, I would imagine you're right-handed?
Yes.
Is it something that you had to work extra hard on your left hand to get the evenness?
Yeah. So I remember as a young kid kind of realizing that and then trying to get my left hand working. I'm like, oh, that's so uncoordinated. It's like just, but yeah. But my left hand works almost as hard as my right hand now when I play, like just some of the grooves. I try to get my left hand involved as much as possible. I know that can busy up the groove, but it all can make the feel. It's an interesting thing
too, I guess, because when you're playing normal right-handed, the left hand is doing a lot of the work.
Yep.
I mean, the right hand's playing a groove on the hat, generally speaking, not always, and the left hand is doing the snare, and if you're playing like, say, the shuffle, the Rosanna shuffle,
or even a blues
shuffle. The left hand is working really hard.
Yeah. I love doing a blues shuffle where your left hand's basically doing the shuffle and your right hand's just doing quarters. And the whole groove is in your left hand. It's nothing else. It's like that. And just to try and get that difference between the soft notes and the accented note. And then to get the groove, it's like, it's a real challenge, but it's a fun one. I like that one. So then that's the warm-up part. Then there's also the stretching. So you can do that, I kind of just do the typical kind of stretch this way and, that way. But then the ones that the physio kind of showed me is just like, pushing down, basically just trying to pull and stretch the nerves through the carpal tunnel and just release those a bit. And then there's some like on a wall where there's a few others. So, by doing those, and I do a lot of them all the time, I'll be always stretching. Like just when I'm driving, stopped at some lights, I'll kind of do my stretches. And, but that's one of the issues. More recently, there's a history of prostate cancer in my family, so I've been testing regularly for that, and then I've recently been diagnosed with sleep apnea, so I'm now wearing a mask to bed and a machine.
So the prostate cancer hasn't raised its head for you yet?
The last blood test was getting into that kind of
the zone.
Questionable zone.
Well, as you would know, I mean, I presume, not that everybody knows this, but I had prostate cancer 18 months ago.
Yeah, right.
And had my prostate removed.
Yeah.
And it's been really good. Like the techniques they have now for dealing with that is much, much better than it ever was before.
Yes. Yeah.
My dad had prostate cancer.
Same.
And my youngest brothers had prostate cancer.
Wow.
So it's in my family.
Yeah.
I got one brother who hasn't been hit by it yet.
Yeah.
And hopefully he won't ever be.
Yeah.
But it's sort of funny. It's one of those things when people talk about cancer now, it's not necessarily the death sentence it once was. Not all types anyway.
No, that's right. When my father, so I'm 50 now. When I think my father was 54, and I remember, being at the hospital when he was having his or part of his prostate removed. My grandfather passed away with prostate cancer.
Wow.
Yeah, so, it's just something, I've been aware of it, since my father went through that operation. So I probably started my checking up on it earlier than I should have, but I just wanted to be proactive.
It's a fairly simple test though, too, with the PSA.
Yeah,
with blood.
Yep, it's just blood. I haven't had to have any of the fingers, the old school method.
It's sort of funny. I had the old school method, and they couldn't find anything.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the funny thing. It's like, oh well, your blood says it is. Let's, it's like, oh no, we. Yeah, but yeah, then I guess, the PSA levels went through the roof, and they go, well, we better do a biopsy.
Yeah.
And then the biopsy comes back. It's like, oh, well, it's there. Let's book you in and take the... I mean, there are other options too these days too with prostate cancer. You don't necessarily have to have it surgically removed.
No.
And I'm sure that as time goes by, there'll be other things that they'll work out that they can do that may be less intrusive as well.
Yeah.
It's just to make one of those things as time goes by and technology gets better and we learn more and more about what the body does and why it does it. And what other health issues?
Well, I think they're the big three. The other one that I haven't mentioned yet is tinnitus, just the ringing in the ears.
That would be a big one for drummers.
Well,
I know of several drummers, younger guys that I worked with, because obviously, when we were young, that was just something you just didn't know about.
Exactly right. And there wasn't any awareness about protection either.
No. What I was going to say was I worked with Troy Wright for quite a few years.
Yes.
And Troy would always wear hearing protection.
Yep.
And I was like, well, a really incredibly sensible thing to do.
Yes, extremely. I remember becoming aware of it around that time that I started reading the Modern Drummer magazines, because they did a whole thing on hearing protection. I remember reading it. Oh. And at the time, I used to underline all the important points. So I'd go through the magazines with a fluoro yellow highlighter and a ruler and underline that line. Next. And so I think my issues started before that, because around the time I was 10, I used to, for about 2 years, really bad middle ear infections. Really painful, bad. Like I would be in tears with the pain that I was in with these middle ear infections. So I feel like, I can't say for sure, But I feel like part of my problems now was initiated through those middle ear infections, and because up until the time I was maybe 19, 20 or 19, I didn't really play loud, and I didn't, and when I did, I would use headphones, or I'd use these crappy little funny,
the little yellow things.
Yeah. Not that they would do much compared to, the ones that I've got now that are molded to my ears and cost $300, it's like, I have been aware of that for a long time. And even back in the early days before, wearing in-ears was a thing, I used to try and always use headphones.
Yep.
So I'd be that drummer at a live gig with a big, and I remember I couldn't find or maybe they broke, and the only other headphones I had was some gaming headphones. I don't know why I had them, but they had this little microphone and so I remember doing gigs with this set of gaming headphones and a microphone. Everyone thought I was singing as well. I'm like, no, I'm not singing. Anyway.
Oh, well.
Last year I had another one of those circular moments of kind of things from the start happening again. And so like the first one I talked about was, when I got to meet my very first drum student and my very first teacher in the same room and kind of hang out with them. And for many years, as soon as I kind of got into those modern drummer magazines, I was obsessed with Dave Weckl, but just because he had a cool drum setup, and he...
Sorry, you keep going.
His technique, everything about what he did was just inspirational. So he was coming to do a clinic tour of Australia, and the night he was in Brisbane, we weren't going to be there because, or we weren't going to be in Queensland because we're going on holidays to Sydney to visit grandparents and family. And I was so bummed out that I wasn't going to be able to see Dave Weckl. Anyway, I'm like, wait a minute, he's doing Sydney. When's he doing? He's doing Sydney while we're there. So I got Dad to book me tickets, and he drove me to the Enmore Theatre, did the clinic, and at the end of the clinic, Dad was keen to drive because we'd driven over an hour to get to Enmore Theatre from where my grandma lived, and he was keen to go. And I'm like, Dad, I just want to meet Dave Weckl. This is the best day of my life. I just want to meet him. Can we just wait until he comes out so I can just introduce myself to him and say hello? And he was like, yeah, okay, I guess so. And it kind of meant a lot to him that this was the best day of my life. Like It made, and I had no idea I'd said that until he reminded me about a year ago. Oh. Yeah, and anyway, Dave Weckl came to Brisbane towards the end of last year to do another clinic tour. And, this time it was a bit different because I have my association with Yamaha and because he's one of their, top endorsees.
Yeah.
I had Yamaha Australia contact me and say, hey, we might need some of your gear to supplement Dave Weckl's gear for the clinic.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, sure. You can have if he wants anything, I'll just bring it along. So I took some stuff along that they thought they might need. In the end, they didn't need it. But my mate Jamie, who offered me the endorsement when he first became the head of drums in Australia, he was there. And so I kind of just stuck by him on the night. And he wandered off, and I was like, oh, he's my ticket in. Like, I didn't actually physically have a ticket. I was kind of with Yamaha. And so I went to find him, and I walk in through this door, and here's him, Dave Weckl, and Frank Corniola from Drum Tech, who was putting the whole thing on. And I'm like, oh, I am so sorry. And then Frank recognized me. He said, no, Darran, come in. And so like 5 minutes before Dave Weckl goes on, I get to hang out backstage with him and have a quick chat. And then after everything was done, said and done, everyone's packing up. Dave Weckl's signing autographs and things like that. Jamie comes over to me and says, oh, I forgot to arrange transport for Frank and Dave Weckl back to the hotel tonight. Do you think you might be able to take them? And I'm like, I will happily take them back to the hotel tonight. And then about 5 minutes later, Frank comes over to me and says, oh, it's okay. I've organised someone to take us. But do you think you could pick us up in the morning and take us to the airport? I'm like, I'm there. And then Frank's like, well, come half an hour earlier and I'll have breakfast with you. And so I sat down with Frank and had a good breakfast.
Wow.
And then I'm driving Dave Weckel, who's sitting in my passenger seat with me in the car to the airport, and I'm just in my head, I'm like, 15-year-old Darran would be absolutely this would blow his mind.
Yeah.
And so it was just a nice moment, like another circular moment, you know, circle of life moment for me. And it just kind of made me reflect on just the way things work and how lucky I am to do what I do and to have friends like I have, you know.
Yeah.
And it's great.
How many hours a day would you say that you would play?
Let's break that down to maybe a week. How many hours a week? It's a hard one. It depends on what I've got on.
It's a very physical instrument.
Yeah.
And obviously to play at your peak, you need to be able to practice and spend time playing.
That's right. So right now, let's just go on. I basically do 12 hours of gigs over a weekend. So right at this point now, I'm booked through to the end of the year every Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Wow.
Which is, you know, from a career point of view, that is, you know, the gold standard because you don't have to hustle anymore. Like, you know, I found a venue that want to lock me in for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they pay me well, and it's a fun gig, and I really enjoy doing it. It's playing percussion on a rooftop bar with a DJ, so it's a great venue as well. But you know, there's that part. But during the week, I'm not the kind of guy that will just get on the drums and have a play. Like, if I have a session to do, then I'm on there doing that. I've currently, over the last 18 months, been building my own drum room. It's pretty much been done for the last 6 months. I've got a few little cosmetic things to do and a couple of technical things to do in the room as far as lighting and some of the routing of cables and things. But it's pretty much done. And so I built that room so I can record sessions for people, and also the idea of practice did cross my mind. But
I guess it's also one of those things too, you talk about lighting it,
Yeah.
it gives you the opportunity to maybe do some instructional video type sort of stuff. Is that a plan?
That is definitely a plan, and it's more like that is pretty much the next thing I'm going to be working on. So doing a subscription-based online course.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I think, you know, most musicians that I've talked to in the last, and it's only, I've been kind of, you know, once turning 50, you're starting to think, oh, it's not so long until, you know, retirement. Not that I'm ever going to retire from what I love doing, but there's that whole thing of, you know, you turn 65 or 67 or whatever it is now and you can retire. And how much superannuation do you have, and will that be enough to live on? And so I started asking, you know, my peers, you know, how much superannuation do you have? And they were like, none. I'm like, what are you going to do when you're at So that's, for me, that's a focus. So building into my, you know, my gigs, my 12 hours a week, that covers, you know, my living expenses and saving money. But I think, you know, I need to start doing something that generates income for the future.
Yeah.
And so building an online platform where I can sell videos or sell a subscription to a course.
Online course.
Yeah. That will kind of be my retirement plan. The other thing is, in this room, I built it big enough so that I can have a second drum kit in there and start teaching from that room as well.
Oh,
so
okay.
I will be trying to build a teaching empire at some point in time.
Have you spoken to Troy Wright about how he's gone about doing it?
Well, see, I worked with Troy, for Troy.
Oh, that's where you were for?
Yeah, for 2 years, nearly 3 years. And, you know, I love Troy, absolutely inspired by him as a person and also what he's done.
He's very driven.
Yeah. And so I didn't want to kind of finish working for him and then start my own thing straight away. I think because I respect him. And I worked with Sire Hanlon at the Hanlon Music School as well. I taught there. And so I didn't kind of want to go hammers and tongs at a teaching school straight after leaving one, and so I've put a year and a half now in between me leaving that and starting my own thing, which I think it was a good break for me. I needed that, and I just needed to kind of formulate a concept in my mind of how I was going to run it. And I don't go intentionally in stealing ideas from people and using them myself, but there is a kind of a proven method.
That's not anything new. It's not a new idea or a new concept.
That's right. Yeah, and so I'm just going to find my own way of providing the proven method, but I don't want to force it, and I'm not going to try and make it happen any quicker than it does organically. So I've got a few guys that are ready to start, and I'll just start them.
I often get a lot of people requesting if they can just come in and practice.
Yes.
Because it's a very difficult thing to find a place to play a drum kit.
Yeah.
I mean, Todd Burns often comes in here if he's doing a theatre show, and he wants to rehearse, he wants to practice up part of the show or get his chops together or whatever, and he'll come in here and spend. And I think he's done a couple of times when he's had a couple of students, and he'll come in because you can set up. You've got the space to set up two kits.
Yep.
But it is something that for drummers is a difficult thing to find a space where you can actually go and play.
Yeah.
I guess that with the rise of electronic kits, it's made life a lot easier.
Definitely.
How do you feel about electronic kits?
I don't have anything against them at all. I feel like they've come a long way. As technology progresses, they've progressed as well, and so we have these drums now that feel like you're playing an acoustic kit. And respond even like you're playing an acoustic kit.
Well, you've even got to the point now where Roland are making pretty much an acoustic kit with mesh heads.
Yeah.
And it's for all intents and purposes, until you actually get up close and see that the cymbals are rubber.
Yeah.
It looks like an acoustic kit.
Yep. Yeah.
Is Yamaha doing a similar thing?
Yamaha have got their latest kit out. It's not it doesn't look like a full drum kit. It does look more like this, as with a drum veneer on it, wooden shell. But yeah, I think for me, I've always seen electric drums as something that doesn't replace acoustic drums, but helps augments. Yeah, and so that's kind of my theory.
Because you've often, was I be correct in saying that you had an acoustic kit with one of those SPD pads?
Yep.
And you would trigger claps and
different sounds and So, whenever I do a gig with Guy, it's usually because his drummer is on another gig or is unavailable. So that's his drummer's Andy Fissenden, who's an amazing drummer based out of Melbourne. And whenever I do a gig with Guy, I don't even have to bring drumsticks. Like everything is spec'd to Andy's spec. So we have a nice, the last 3 or 4 times it's been the exact same kit as I use at home in exactly the same colour, silver sparkle, maple Yamaha kit. He uses a different brand of cymbals, but just for the gig, I just use his cymbals. There's usually a couple of pairs of sticks there, but I bring my own because I really like the sticks that I use and I'm used to them. But also part of the spec is a pad with all of Guy's sounds on it for his songs, and so that's a part of a lot of bands' sound now, is that having those auxiliary sounds that are generated from an SPD or some kind of electronic percussion pad.
When you're playing with Guy, is there a click track?
Yep.
Is the whole show click track or just some of it?
No, the whole show. Oh, there's 1 or 2 songs that aren't. And usually they're like the covers, like he does Like It Like That as a shuffle sometimes. So when it was first released, it was very, hey, do you like it like that?
Yep.
Well, now it's like, hey, so, and the funny thing is, every gig I do with him, it's slightly different. There's a slightly different arrangement of it. So it's like, I can't just use my charts from the last gig. I have to rewrite the charts or change them depending on what arrangement we're doing. But a lot of that is just a lot of his sound is on track. Not a lot of it. The click's on track. There's a couple of little vocal cues on there. But Scott Alpin is Guy's MD and keyboard player, and so Scott kind of has a mic on him as well that just goes straight to our ears, and so he can direct us as well throughout the gig. And but most of the gigs that I've done in the last 10, 15 years are tracked. They got click at least, or some kind of backing track or loops or something.
Okay, I remember doing a gig with you where you were sitting in the green room with a laptop.
Yes.
Recording cues.
Vocal cues? Yeah.
Cues for yourself. Is that something that you get the chance to do very often, or is...
I did that for a specific band that I used to run, and we had a residency in a really cool club in Brisbane at the time, and it wasn't the same band. It was just who I could get. And the thing about it was I was driving it from the drums, but just so I could pay everyone a decent amount, I kept the band size to 3 people, myself, a singer and a bass player, and the rest was supplemented by tracks. But because, I couldn't lock in the same bass player for every gig because they were, freelancing as well and doing, so I kind of had to use this method, and it's not my method. I've got the idea of other people of just putting everything on cue. And so I would do cues for the band entries. So like there'd be a cue 2 bars before a drum entry. I'd be like, drums are in 2 bars, and then do a bar of count. And then if it was a funny part, I would kind of cut the part or the drum beat and put it 2 bars before in my ears, so I could hear what the drum beat was, just as a reminder. But I'd also do that with the vocal entry cue. So whenever the vocals were cued to come in, because I would change the arrangements of these songs as well, so they wouldn't be stock standard arrangements.
Yep.
And the other thing I did was everything segued together. So the first set was an hour and the second set was an hour and a half.
And there was
we didn't
no
stop.
gaps.
No,
Yeah.
just kept going. And so the cues were the glue that kept that whole thing together. And the other thing I would cue on there is the bass parts.
Oh.
So I'd either give a sample of what the bass was about to play 2 bars before and then count him in, or I'd be, 2 beats before a note, I'd be like G sharp, whatever, the next, And
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
And they're wearing in-ears?
Yeah, everyone's on
Everyone's
in-ears.
in-ears.
And it's just at the start, it plays on your mind because you're trying to process what you're hearing, but 2 bars later, but trying to play with the track. And so, yeah, after...
I guess you get
used to it.
You get used to it.
Yeah, and probably after 2 or 3 gigs doing it, it becomes more of a subconscious thing rather than it right in your face of this is really confronting and I don't like this person in my ear telling me what to do every couple of bars. But it was a fun thing. It took me a lot of work to pull all that together, but it was so much fun and worth it. And like even most of the people I worked with in that band always say, you should do that again. You need to do that again. It was so much fun. It was such a good band. And but also it meant that I could introduce new songs every week to the set list and we not have to rehearse them. I would just send the demo of my production work to whoever was on that weekend and just say, hey, I'm going to add this. Make sure you know it. La, 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 la. That's it. Yeah, that was a fun one. I'm about to, this year for me is kind of setting myself up for, just thinking 10, 15 years into the future. And so one of the other things I'm working on is another kind of show, more of a show rather than a band. Something that I could do in theatre or, like a Vegas-y kind of thing, like a Blue Man Group kind of thing based around drums, but also based around music, entertainment, the arts. And so there'll be a bit of that kind of, cues and everything going on for that show as well.
Yeah.
But that's another thing I've had brewing up here for the last couple of years. And I know how I want it to look and I know how I want it to sound. I've just got to do
the work
now.
Yeah.
And so that's this year's setting that up as well. So
yeah, I guess, and then having finally have the space to have the drums set up.
That's
and
right.
Do it, that all helps.
yes, it does. Yeah, having my own place, my own room, has been a dream for as long as I can remember, because it goes back to that whole problem of drums make noise, and people don't like noise at 6 o'clock in the morning when
Or 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Or
The first time the police knocked at the door was when I was, 7 years old, and the neighbour had complained there was drums being played at 6 a.m. And my parents pointed at me and goes, it was him. And I'm this little 7-year-old kid, and the police were like, it was him? Anyway. So, yeah, like,
I can remember doing a rehearsal with a band in Cabarita, I think it was, where the bass player and the other guitar player were renting.
Oh, yeah.
And we were down in the garage making lots of noise.
Yep.
And this is back in the days where I think I had a Marshall half stack with a quad box with a 100-watt head, and the other guitar player had a 100-watt Marshall with a quad box. I do remember there was the neighbour from across the road came, and he'd kicked the door so hard that the garage door fell in.
Oh, no.
Scared the shit
Yeah,
out
that
of us.
would have, yes. Wow. It's been a dream for a long time to have a room where I can just do what I need to do and not annoy anyone.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I built it myself. I just bought a slab and shed package, and then I've done all the everything else myself. And so
Did a lot of research into...
Did a lot of research. I didn't quite get it right. But it is the first time I've done something like this. So, there's a little bit of
another whole learning thing to go through.
There's a little bit of sound leakage, kind of from maybe 200 hertz and down, and it's not enough.
Too.
Yeah, like if the family are in the lounge room watching TV or in their rooms doing whatever they're doing, you can't really notice at all. It's if you're standing right outside my room, my drum room, you can hear it, but it's not something that's going to annoy the neighbours. So, but that being said, I'm not going to have band rehearsals in there at midnight. I'm not even going to play drums in there after 8 o'clock at night anyway. Yeah. I should never have a problem of neighbours complaining or annoying people too much. So.
Yeah.
Unless I forget to close the doors properly. That's that.
Making a career out of playing drums is one thing, but we've just been through an interesting historic moment with COVID, where we couldn't go out and perform.
No.
How did you find that period, and how did you deal with that?
I think it scared the life out of me when it first started all going down, and I realised at that point that I'd predominantly been living week to week, and it scared me so much that I just vowed that I was never going to live week to week again. And so the hardest thing, I guess, immediately was half of my income got wiped out because I could no longer go and perform and gig. Fortunately, I'd had that foresight years ago to diversify, what I do. So I did two things. One thing I was already doing, which was lecturing. I was teaching at a university, and so everything just went to online. So I still retained the income from what I taught. The second thing was that at the time I lived less than a kilometre away from the university that I taught at. And because no students were allowed
on campus,
I asked my boss if I, as a part of my teaching online, could I teach my drum lessons from the drum room at the university? And he's like, yes. And then I just thought I'd push it a little bit further and said to him, can I bring in my recording gear and do some sessions for people while I'm there? And he's like, certainly can. And so I just put out a social media post saying, hey, all you singer-songwriters out there, people who are writing songs or musicians who want to record something, send me your tracks and I'll do some drum. So I got really busy doing a lot of recording for people during that.
And I know that I did some live streaming stuff from here, and you came down and
yes, that's right.
played some drums.
Yeah.
Played some drums with Janess and
Yes.
Christian and
CK and Chris Palmer.
yeah,
in keys.
yeah. And then did you play on? I think you did one for me next door where I did the separated.
Yep.
The isolated
yeah.
isolated parts.
Yeah.
That was an interesting concept.
But I think, I think that when you go through something like that event, it forces you to do a few things. One is, evaluate, which is what I did. How can I future-proof myself? Or make sure that if this happens again, that I'm going to be okay to look after myself financially and live and actually have food on the table. But the other thing it does is it makes you think a little bit more outside the box. And I saw a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Like yourself with doing what you did here.
Well, yeah, I got to say, the main reason I did what I did was because playing music is playing your instrument. Like for me, the ability to maintain my singing voice,
yes,
and my playing skills, but to maintain a band,
yeah,
that plays together. If you're not constantly maintaining that, it's a skill that you can lose.
That's right.
I find that if I don't pick up an instrument, like if I don't pick up a guitar and play for 2 weeks, I really notice the difference in my ability to be able to play complex pieces of music.
Yeah.
And the same would apply for singing. It's like when you're singing all the time, it's a muscle.
That's right.
and you work it. And when you're singing all the time, everything works great.
Yeah.
If you take quite an extended period of time out, you come back to sing, you go back and do one gig, you can blow your voice out and not be able to sing a weekend.
Yep.
It's a very easy thing to do.
Yeah.
So my motivation in some ways was quite selfish.
Yes.
Is I wanted to be able to maintain my own playing ability in my singing. But not only that, I wanted to be able to have the band come and play, and we put screens up around the kit to isolate the drums, and we made sure we're all... And I think we only had... I could only do 3 or 4, I think, in this space, and that was quite acceptable, apparently, I think, from memory.
Yep.
The whole point is that at least once a week, the band would get together and play.
Yeah.
And then it became more of a thing where I was like, okay, well, let's see if get other people in and see if there's an audience for it as well, and live stream it. And there was a whole learning curve around that.
Yeah.
So I've always had a little interest in technology and have a little bit of love of learning how to get my head around things. It can be quite frustrating, and COVID was frustrating trying to learn how to live stream when you would set up in here.
Yeah.
And I remember the very first few. We would say, okay, we'd advertise it. We're going to go to live stream at 4:00 in the afternoon, and you'd sound check, and it was like everything's great, and you hit the go button. And it was like everything's not great, and it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
We ended up working out a way of making one of the only ways to make it work was to do like it was still live, but it was like a pre-record.
Yeah.
And that way you could guarantee you could buffer the internet, because the upload speed, that was what was always a big problem, is getting enough upload speed to actually get the live stream working.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting time, but that was my motivation for doing it was more about wanting to play music and wanting to maintain the skill level of myself and the band.
Yeah.
And I think it was just a great opportunity too, because I think the music community got a little bit fractured during that time.
Yeah.
And it was just a wonderful thing for me to connect with other people
Yep.
and have people come in and
Yes.
and one of the things I actually really enjoyed about that experience was I got to see bands play in here that I would never have gotten the chance to see out in a venue.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was quite an exciting and enjoyable thing from my point of view. So obviously did some live streaming here. Was the live streaming thing part of...
I did only for my students at the university. So every week I would do a live masterclass for. It was mainly for my drum students, but any of the students could jump on and watch. And
so, do you think that experience is going to help translate for when you're putting the course together that you're intending on doing now?
Yeah, it definitely has. So I've already done an outline for. I'm going to do multi-facets to this, and so I've done the outline for the first section, and a lot of what I learnt through the COVID and the online lessons applies to my approach to this first little section. Yeah.
All right. Let's just jump on the kit and
cool.
Demonstrate a couple of things.
Some things, yeah.
You were talking before about that particular shuffle.
I guess your feet are kind of just mainly kind of doing quarters, and in essence your right cymbal as well, and the left hand is really where it's all at. So I'll just play you that. So. So there's that kind of shuffle, and then in the context without a band, it just sounds quiet or dry, and
Yeah.
But once you're playing with the band, there's the feel kind of comes in.
So I guess this is one of the things that I've always been surprised by. There is a world of different shuffles.
Yes.
And it just always amazes me how different things can be from the Texas shuffle point of view, or the New Orleans type sort of vibe, or where the accent, or that we should say that where the drive is either coming from the one or from the two, or the and. Like it can be coming from a lot of different places.
Yeah. One of the shuffles that I do enjoy playing is kind of really similar to that one. The drive is more from the kick. It's like a 4 on the floor shuffle, which is kind of what I just did, but it's less dependent on the left hand. And I love doing this thing where, if you think of the shuffle more as a group of 3 triplets, I'm just really accenting the third triplet.
Okay.
Each one. So it's kind of this, that kind of thing.
Oh.
So that. So I'm doing like soft, loud, and it just. Yeah. So, and then there's you kind of more traditional right-handed shuffles where. I could do it with a 4 on the floor. And then you get to your variations on kick. And then you get to your adding ghost notes. And then you get to your halftime shuffles, which is
like Rosanna, or
Purdy
shuffle.
Bottom, yeah. I love a good triplet. I love a shuffle.
It is amazing how it really does change depending on what part of the triplet you put the accent.
Yes.
Like it really is
Yeah.
Because I guess that's all the shuffle is. It is just it's the triplet thing, and it depends on where the accent is.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Oh,
so there's so much you can do with it, and that's one of the things I love about drumming, and just one little accent change changes the whole feel.
Yeah.
One beat displacement on a kick or something. Even adding the ghost notes in there, is really changes the whole feel or sound of a groove.
Like Gad was famous for a lot of the different things that he played.
Yes.
Why is it that it would be? Why is it? Do you think it's so difficult for people to reproduce like that type of groove?
I think we're all unique.
Yeah.
And I think as much as we try to sound like someone else, we're never, ever really going to sound exactly the same as them. We can imitate as much as we like. But I'm not Steve Gadd, and I'm not Jeff Porcaro, and I'm not Dave Weckl. But I feel like...
You've got your own thing.
But, yeah, and that comes from trying to be like Dave Weckl, trying to be like Virgil. It comes from drawing from those
drawing the influences,
people.
Making it your own.
You develop your own style out of a mashup of all of your influences, all of your heroes, mentors, idols,
Yeah.
That is what you draw on to become and to create your own sound as a musician.
When you're doing session stuff and you're playing drums for other people,
Yes.
do they tell you what they want to hear, or is it something where you listen to it and go, okay, I think this is the appropriate part? How does that work?
It works both ways. So most of the time, straight up, I will ask, do you want it to be an exact replica of the demo you've given me?
Yep.
And a lot of times they'll say, yes, this is what we want. Then I will do that. So like, if it's someone that's not in the room with me and has sent me a song, emailed me a song to record, then I'll shoot back a few questions. Do you want it exactly the same as the demo? Do you want any extra fills in there or extra, any variations? And so based on what they respond, I kind of create a part around that. Then I'll also always do a pass or a take of my ideas as well. And so when I'm editing or comping, the parts to send back as to get their okay, I will usually give them the part that's most kind of is like what they've asked for.
Yes.
But then I'll say, look, I've got 3 other takes of this. If you're not happy with that, let me know, and I'll search through some of the other takes for. And so a lot of the times, before I had my own room, I had to book a room, and I had to wait until I had 3 or 4 projects to make it economically viable for me to actually do this. And so I'd book a room, and I'd rush through all of these songs. And what I would do is I would do more takes than needed and try and throw in things that I wouldn't normally throw in and do, because a lot of the times I couldn't send it back to them while I was recording. I'd had to kind of go home, do a bit of editing, send it back to them the next day. And if they wanted changes, it's like... So
you're giving yourself some variations in case...
in case they wanted something different. And so that saved me a lot of times from having to rebook a studio and having to redo something, And so...
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
You just got to kind of anticipate, what might be or what they might want to... Just trying to get that right in that pocket and sound same.
You're not feeling like you're having to really
you're not
belt.
laying in. So on gigs where sometimes I lay in and I don't realise that I'm laying in so heavy until like 3 songs in, and I'm starting to feel a little tingle in my little pinky, and it's like, oh, I might be a bit overplaying it here. or just volume or velocity wise. And so, yeah, it's something I always have to be on top of.
I'll put links to all things that Darran's been doing and the blah, 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 all those sort of things down in the description below. And if you want to check out what he's up to or get a lesson, all that sort of stuff, you can contact Darran below. Hopefully we'll see you all on the next podcast. Thanks a lot.